As the so-called protagonist of the global social engineering experiment, I, Stephen Bell, have been publicly persecuted by governments and intelligence agencies alike since late 2008. In recent years, I have urged the oversight body with the intelligence agencies called TET to investigate my very notorious and public case. In this video, we're going to examine my complaints and their responses. Many falsely believe Denmark is this idyllic place where governments and police and intelligence agencies uphold the rule of law. Contrary to popular belief, this is not reality. The global social engineering experiment and the public persecution of me, among other cases, extensively prove this. The Danish intelligence agency, PET, is legally mandated only to investigate Danish citizens who are suspected of violating Chapter 12 and 13 of the Danish Penal Code, which covers treason and terrorism, which explains why they from time to time proclaim that I'm some kind of potential terrorist or traitor to my country. This is basically just to give themselves a pretext for what they are already doing. TET, the so-called intelligence oversight body, has an extremely limited mandate. It can only assess whether PET complies with the PET Act, specifically regarding data protection under the European GDPR requirements. When a citizen files a complaint with TET, it is also restricted to one response, regardless of findings. No authorized information about you is being processed. Despite this glaring limitation, I have filed 3 complaints in recent years with this oversight body, which we shall review. My first complaint to the intelligence oversight body is from November 8, 2021. My complaint is primarily focused on PET's violations of my data protection rights in the way of handling and disseminating my personal information gathered from sources like signals intelligence, other authorities, and to a lesser extent biosignals and surveillance captured through capabilities like remote neuromonitoring. For example, I wrote, the collection, processing and dissemination by PET of my toilet habits, for instance, can hardly be claimed to be relevant to the service's operations, the purposes for which the information was collected, and so on. Here I was clearly making reference to how intelligence services publicly broadcast my toilet habits to everybody who follows the program, as a way of ridiculing and discrediting me to the public, which obviously has nothing to do with the intelligence services' actual mandate of combating terrorism or treason. A fact I expect everybody to find particularly on point, so to say, as intelligence clearly have shown themselves to be obsessed with my toilet habits. In this one complaint from 2021 that you see, I really did keep my complaint in line with TET's mandate, but of course I did not fail to mention how PET are labeling me as a sex criminal, notwithstanding there being no actual cases against me ever, and how this information was being disseminated, i.e. broadcasted, through various communication channels, one of which is the real-time synthetic telepathy communication system, as well as Denmark's radio to a lesser extent. TET concluded this complaint on April 29, 2022, with their standard response. No authorized information about you is being processed, and I noticed no change in PET's illegal activities during or after this period of time. In fact, their attempts in setting me up intensified. On June 30th of 2023, I filed yet another detailed complaint over the intelligence service PET. In this complaint, I also focus on their use of advanced signals intelligence and biosurveillance capabilities, which contravened the Administration of Justice Act, Chapter 71. That is the Danish law that governs when intelligence agencies and police alike are allowed to conduct surveillance and wiretapping and the like, which strictly prohibit the implantation of biosensors in non-consensual human beings that are used for remote neuromonitoring. Such sensors that enable remote neuromonitoring and brain-computer interface, also called BCI, capabilities that are comparable to that of the DARPA N3 program, These are the very types of very advanced capabilities that are being used against me in connection with this global social engineering experiment. And my understanding of intelligence agencies and their operations has provided me with some foresight, enabling me to anticipate their strategies. In my complaint to TET, I have outlined how PET were likely planning to gain access to my computer, either through hacking or physical entry into my home, to plant child pornography. This would then prompt a police raid based on a proclaimed anonymous tip. I also noted in my complaint how this same methodology could very easily be used to plant drugs in my home or car. By essentially documenting these predictions in my official complaint with the intelligence oversight body, I have effectively made a paper record, so if, or when rather, the intelligence agencies follow through on their plan of framing me for a sex crime, which they most likely will, then I can rely on this in court. I say these things because that is the ultimate outcome, because they have been for years broadcasting to the entire world that I'm some kind of monstrous sex criminal, so that is ultimately what they're going to frame me as. These were not the only predictions I made in my official complaint to the intelligence oversight body on June 30th of 2023. I have also detailed how PET would continue to use members of the public as their de facto proxies. For instance, they would have these individuals report me to the police not for actual crimes but for being strange or claiming I was acting inappropriately, suggesting I was engaging in something untoward rather than actual crimes. These predictions have now extensively come true, as I predicted they would. For example, they enticed random people from various organisations to report me to the police for being strange and for posting social media content about the global social engineering experiment and the public persecution. These police reports were filed in connection with my sports shooting and hunting licence, which they clearly want to revoke without having any legal justification to do so. So that is what they are trying to fabricate here. In January of 2024, 2 local women also reported me to the police for a home invasion, even though the perpetrators of that crime were already in custody. Despite the fact that I have not been raided by the police or charged for the possession of child pornography, the state arbiters of this global social engineering experiment continuously falsely claim me to viewing and possessing such material. They also accuse me of being indecent towards other people, typically younger girls, when I go to the local store to pick up packages. I'm basically being accused of all sorts of things on the basis of what they say that is going on in my thought processes. This is the very same methodology that they employ when harassing people in my vicinity and blaming me for it. They use the pretext of having me under remote neuromonitoring to claim that I'm responsible or guilty for everything that they are announcing over their communication channels, which I'm supposedly thinking or intending to do, without any evidence or actual events corresponding to these typically preposterous and endless claims and accusations. The whole situation going on here in Denmark is extraordinarily authoritarian, not to mention Orwellian. These continuous active measures and public targeting of me is very much like in the action movie from 2008 called Eagle Eye, where an evil AI is making life extraordinarily difficult for the protagonist in the film called Jerry Shaw.
What?
You're not listening. We told you to stay on the train.
How are you doing this?
Next stop is Wilson Station. A black Porsche Cayenne will be waiting at the northwest exit.
Listen.
Get in the passenger seat.
Listen! No, I'm done.
Man in front of the exit door is white coat. It's Jerry Shaw. Jerry Shaw.
Hey! You Jerry Shaw? No.
Wilson Station, exit now.
I said you Jerry Shaw! Hey! Come here!
The only difference between this scene and real life is that intelligence agencies and government and program are using way more advanced technologies. So instead of mass phone calls to everybody in the vicinity of Jerry Shaw calling him a terrorist, In real life, they're using the synthetic telepathy communication system to effectively make the same call to everybody in my vicinity, calling me a rapist or a pedophile, and that's when they're not mass broadcasting virtual movie fabrications in which they proclaim that I'm the protagonist without me having any involvement whatsoever. Government and intelligence agencies are continuously doing these things, despite that there has never been one single case against me ever for a sex crime, something I have consistently proven throughout the many years of the program. TET, like in previous responses to my extraordinary complaint and forecast from June 30th of 2023, came with the same generic response and filler as previously. So if and when you find yourself in an Orwellian nightmare like the one I'm actually living in, you must do whatever you can as soon as you can. I have filed yet another complaint with TET on January 9th, 2025, despite knowing full well that this oversight body is totally aligned with the intelligence agencies and will do nothing to help Danish citizens against intelligence agencies' abuses. In my latest complaint, I'm obviously reiterating many of my previous claims, but with newer and stronger argumentation, really emphasizing how PET, the intelligence service, is violating the PET Act when obtaining and broadcasting my personal information. I also highlight how PET have made fake threat assessments in 2024, presumably to justify their so-called investigations on me. These threat assessments conveniently align with the fabricated police reports that I have shown in this video and elsewhere that the Danish government has enticed people to make on multiple occasions. The whole situation has become so blatantly obvious that the Danish government and authorities like the PET are actually openly encouraging people to treat me with hostility, literally plotting and urging people to act against me in all sorts of malicious ways. All of this with the intent to do me harm or to have me set up. All of these accounts that I'm mentioning here are well-established facts that most people here in Denmark at least are well aware are taking place. I have also in my recent complaint detailed how the Danish intelligence service PET are in close cooperation with the British and American intelligence services, through which PET gets access to my live remote neural monitoring and access to the synthetic telepathy broadcasting system. At this point in time, the public persecution against me has escalated to such an extent that Denmark resembles an apartheid state where the rule of law is completely ignored in all matters involving me or this all-encompassing global social engineering experiment. I also, in my TET complaint, give an account of the extrajudicial treatment and cruel and unusual punishment that I have been subjected to, including months of sleep deprivation, the financial destruction of my small business one-stop engine shop, along other human rights abuses by PET and their international partners from the US and Britain. These actions are occurring on Danish soil, violating the European Convention on Human Rights, to which Denmark is the signatory to. TET responded to my latest complaint on the 15th of April of 2025. Their reply was predictably inadequate. Not only did they repeat the same old generic line, but they also proclaimed that they found insufficient grounds to investigate my claims against PET in my latest complaint, which is particularly absurd in light of the actual circumstances. You can now hear verbatim their reasoning for it. TET further finds that your complaint regarding PET does not provide sufficient grounds for the supervisory authority to investigate whether PET complies with the regulations in paragraphs 3, 4 and 6a to 11 as mentioned in paragraph 18 subsection 1. Your request in this regard cannot therefore be accommodated. So TET has proven itself countless of times to be corrupt, useless and incompetent, much like Denmark's independent police complaint authority, which similarly never sides with the public. Denmark is not this idyllic place that you might believe, where the rule of law prevails, as can be seen time and again. We are rapidly moving towards technocratic authoritarianism, replacing the rule of law outright. Most astonishingly, the powers that be have actually managed to get the entire world, including so-called independent media, to not only avoid me like the plague, but also in many instances repeat the intelligence agency's propaganda narratives and psychological operations verbatim, instead of inquiring both sides of this very notorious and bona fide story. Of a Danish civilian, namely me, being openly targeted by multiple intelligence agencies and governments, including from the US, as part of a global social engineering experiment that is clearly designed to normalize this kind of public persecution, including the use of very sophisticated and advanced emerging neurosciences and electromagnetic weapons and communications capabilities, of course along with the blatant implementation of technocratic authoritarianism.